Snoop Dogg and D.I.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Villanova Tip Time, the Villanova men's basketball pregame show. I am your host, Chris Notaro, and we're brought to you here by Homefield Apparel as part of the Nova Insider Network. Check out Homefield Apparel's awesome Nova merch. Use promo code Nova Insider for a healthy little discount there at checkout. I promise you'll be happy with the goods that they've got right now. Got a lot of great stuff. And happy almost Thanksgiving and a very happy college basketball feast week, as we've already been treated to some awesome college basketball this week, and there's plenty more to come. But of course, we're here today for Villanova's midday matchup against Texas Tech in the first round of the Battle for Atlantis, taking place in the Bahamas. Today, we're going to chat through the bounce-back win for Nova against Maryland, some overall Big East thoughts. We'll introduce the Battle for Atlantis tournament and field, and of course, today's opponent in Texas Tech, before we get you on your way for the game at 2:30 on ESPN2. So first up, let's talk about what we saw from Villanova last, which was Friday against Maryland at the Finn. Villanova walked away from this one with a 57-40 win in what can probably be described as a tale of two halves. The first half was a classic Villanova beatdown, 39-15, with Nova in full control. If you took a snapshot moment in time of the Nova Twitter sphere, I think there were a lot of people pretty pumped with that outcome as it stood at halftime, silencing a lot of the effort critics, a lot of effort concerns coming out of the game prior, being out-hustled, out-coached, whatever you want to say about the Penn game. I think Villanova came out firing in the Maryland game that clearly had lit a fire under them, and they showed it in that first half. But the second half was kind of ugly. The second half alone as a box score was 25-18 in favor of Maryland. Really don't ever like it when your team fails to score 20 points in a half. But look, Nova was up 30-plus in this game with like 15 minutes left in the ball game. If you want to read too much into it from there, go ahead. But it seemed kind of sort of like a mercy rule situation, and the guys losing a little bit of focus. There were an absolute ton of hot takes after this game about this being some huge problem. And I think for a lot of folks, a little bit of an overreaction, in my opinion. We're 4 games in. We have a ton of new pieces on this team. I saw something in the discourse that is a super important reminder. Progress, not perfection. Really important to remember with the heavy rotation of new players that we've got on this team, and also this team rolling deeper than Villanova has in a really long while. It feels like a lot of folks out there speak as though they're expecting perfection all the time, and that's really never what this program has been about. Excellence, sure, but never perfection. It's always been about attitude and effort and process and putting in the work and getting better by the end of the season. But somewhere along the way, for a subsection of fans, particularly in this Twitter sphere, there's this like expectation of perfection that I think nobody's really trying to attain. So I see that kind of coming into play in games like this where Nova walked out of there with a 17-point win. But to expect flawless technical perfection in game 4, come on. Now, I think there's legitimate concern with getting up that much, getting up that big in a game and just kind of stopping playing basketball. But that's something that happens in November. That's a good lesson for the team to kind of build on from there. My personal favorite was watching folks who decided to freak out about metrics and rankings, which newsflash improved pretty nicely after this resounding win. So I thought that was a pretty crazy take. I got a text from a Nova buddy sort of monitoring that discourse. And I believe he used the term psychotic to talk about metrics and rankings coming off a 17-point win, that you didn't put the foot down hard enough. It's sort of a little silly. Would I like to see Nova finish strong and run up the score? Sure. But from a mid-November game, like I already said, I'm glad that this newly assembled squad has a reference point for later in the season. The next time they get up big, I think that's where we want to judge them a little bit harder. What are they going to do with it the next time, sort of using the Maryland game as a learning experience? I also want to point out that Tyler Burton was excellent in this game despite limited minutes, 15 points in 20 minutes. The team looked excellent when playing through Eric Dixon early. That seemed to be kind of a staple of the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game that got them out to an early lead that they really never looked back from, despite, sputtering and stopping scoring for like 10 plus minutes in the second half at one point. But most importantly, like I said, they came out fired up, put the game away very early, which is exactly what all of the talking heads were looking for in this game. You kind of got exactly what you liked. But I think there's also some questions like how good is Maryland? Maybe like not good, maybe like very bad. You don't want to like put too much on this, but it was definitely a good bounce back, get right game for the Cats as they need it, as they're now heading international to begin this Battle for Atlantis tournament. But before we get into Atlantis, let's talk a little bit about the elephants of the Big East in UConn and Marquette. I'm going to start with Marquette, currently ranked 4th in the country, wire to wire, handled number 1 Kansas last night. For those of you that stayed up late and watched the whole game like I did, it was a really great performance from a Marquette team who now gets a shot at number 2 Purdue tonight in the Maui championship game. That game's coming up at 5 Eastern, so it's going to be like right after the Cats game wraps. So you've got like an awesome 4-hour stretch of basketball coming up. And it's probably more like a 10-hour stretch when you factor in all the games that are going to be on tonight as well from across the college basketball landscape. But that said, I think Marquette looked leaps and bounds better than Kansas last night. I think that's one of the biggest things that stood out to me was just how much better Marquette looked than Kansas. And that was with Marquette's best player, Tyler Kolek, having just sort of an okay, not great game. I don't know that he necessarily looked that good. I think his box score was like fine. This is not meant to diss him. I think he's an elite player. More so just calling out if Marquette was able to look that good against Kansas with Tyler Kolek having like an okay game, what do they look like if he's just absolutely firing? Could be really scary. They got a good thing going in Milwaukee this season. And essentially they're playing for the number 1 ranking in the country tonight. And they certainly look like a number 1 overall seed come tourney time if they can maintain this level of play. But that's obviously a big if once we get into kind of the gauntlet that is the Big East schedule. Moving along to UConn, reigning national champion, lost a couple of dudes from their national championship team, and it doesn't seem to have slowed them down one bit. In fact, they maybe look even nastier. Most recently dominating number 17 Texas at Madison Square Garden on Monday night. This was also without their stud freshman Castle, who they're going to be getting back hopefully by the time they play Kansas on December 1st. So going to be interesting. I know we don't, transitive property doesn't mean anything in sports, but it'll be an interesting reference point considering you've got both Marquette and UConn playing that Kansas team, where UConn might even match up a little bit better, which is interesting to think about. And then Creighton, of course, doesn't have quite the non-conference schedule that UConn and Marquette have, but have found their way into the Tier 1 conversation in the Big East. I think after this week, nobody's really sleeping on the Big East anymore, at least not the top of the Big East, as these teams look, all class. Like they really look like best in show, some of the best teams in the country. And the Cats are going to have a lot of work to do to kind of play up to that level, but we'll see. The Cats definitely have a deep rotation and some pretty interesting pieces that if playing at peak might be able to match up well. But also these are going to be some tough games, especially the ones on the road. So now to the Bahamas, where the Cats are slated to take on Texas Tech at the bottom of the hour. Just a quick overview of this battle for Atlantis Field and your round 1 matchups. You have the Northern Iowa versus number 14 UNC game, which I believe just went final. A dominant second half from UNC to come back and win that game easily after being down at halftime. So the winner of Texas Tech and Villanova is going to get UNC tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. The loser is going to get Northern Iowa at noon tomorrow. So I think for quality of resume, call it curb appeal, right? I think we probably all hoping for that Villanova UNC matchup tonight, but our next game is our most important one, so we got to take care of business against Texas Tech here today. So looking at the other side of the Atlantis bracket, you've got Memphis and Michigan playing each other later. You've got Stanford and Arkansas, so the winners play the winners, the losers play the losers, et cetera, et cetera. You hope Villanova can find its way through a winner's bracket, and looking ahead in kind of an ideal road, you'd be hoping for number 20 Arkansas there, because then you'd get number 14 UNC tomorrow, number 20 Arkansas. It would give you sort of the most, call it resume potential from a road. I don't think the team is thinking or caring that much about that. They're taking it one game at a time, as they should, looking to stack a couple wins here in the Bahamas at a tournament that Villanova has been successful at in the past and won, I believe, the most recent time they played in it a couple of years ago. So taking it one game at a time, but wanted to kind of highlight that potential road for you between tomorrow and Friday. But we'll see where the chips fall once these games get started and keep playing out. But like I said, first up, we have Texas Tech playing out of the Big Ten. Depending on the bracketologist you personally subscribe to, Texas Tech is hovering right around the cut line of the at-large field. So sort of projected to be a tournament caliber team, if you will, but definitely, probably somewhere in the pick to finish like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, somewhere in the Big 12, not necessarily in the very tippy top tier of the Big 12 at present. They have 3 players averaging double digits so far through this young season. All those 3 players are guards: Pop Isaacs, Joe Toussaint, and Darian Williams. Darian Williams jumps out to me because he's not only averaging 11 points a game, he's also adding 9 boards a game to go with them, which is a pretty impressive box average for a guard through 3 games. Of course, it's only 3 games, but something that jumps off the page when you're doing a little advanced look. As Villanova legend Alan Ray pointed out on Twitter last night, this Texas Tech team has been abysmal from three-point land and also has committed 15 turnovers per game in their 3 wins this season. So there's really an importance for Villanova to continue to bring that intensity, and it really can't be overstated. We saw the difference last week in what kind of a more of a tentative sort of lack of intensity against Penn versus the exact opposite in the first half against Maryland. I think bringing that intensity might be able to help the Cats win this game on effort and intensity alone if they can capitalize off of a turnover-prone team. And I think a couple other things that I happen to be watching for are, number one, rotation versus rhythm. As we've seen so far through this, 4 games, Kyle Neptune is going through a pretty deep rotation. We've seen some games where he's played as many as 11 different guys. There's an interesting, I would say, secondary discourse going on about how much of that rotation is helping figure out who your guys are and what their roles are versus how much is that hurting your rhythm. It's hard for guys to get a rhythm, even when they were up big against Maryland. It can be hard to get a rhythm when you have guys constantly coming in and out, although there's an argument that says if you've got a 10-deep lineup, you want to find opportunities for them all to play. You want to keep guys fresh. And so I think everybody's looking for the coaching staff to really find a balance there. And, when you're playing these power conference opponents in these non-conference games, the question is, how much do you want to keep working on that rotation versus settling in with the guys that can put the ball through the hole and get you where you want to be and avoid those 10-minute scoring droughts like we saw in the second half against Maryland. Another thing I'm looking at tonight is working through Eric Dixon. If you look, shout out to my friend Tim who pointed this out at the very beginning of the Maryland game. Look how easy it is when we work through Eric Dixon. The offense and the game just flows so much more naturally for the Cats. They did that early, got out to a pretty nice big lead, and never really looked back, right? So if you look at the box scores on Eric Dixon, they've probably been a little bit less than you might expect, but he's still definitely, the senior leader and the glue guy on this team, and the offense hums the best when they work through Eric Dixon. So eager to see that play out in today's game and through this tournament and how much that may correlate to success on the offensive side of the ball. And lastly, can Tyler Burton keep cooking? He's emerging as an alpha, of the transfer class. I've actually been really happy with all of the transfers. I think they've all contributed in their own way through 4 games, but Tyler Burton, I think, has stood out as a real, you could have a real 3-headed monster between Justin Moore, Eric Dixon, and Tyler Burton. This team is deep. This team is fun to watch, but Tyler Burton, like I said, is kind of standing out above them. He added 15 points in just 20 minutes. So again, kind of that rotational thing. I think the Maryland game also, like I said, is a little bit tough to judge because they were up so big so early. I can think the dynamic of the game changed than if it was like a back and forth tougher matchup, right? But looking to see if Tyler Burton can keep cooking against Texas Tech and in this tournament. So based on today's outcome, like I said, we either play UNC at 2:30 Eastern tomorrow if we win today, or we play Northern Iowa at noon Eastern tomorrow if we lose today. Obviously hoping for that win. That would delay meal timing here at Tip Time HQ. Usually we do kind of that like mid-afternoon meal right around when that timing of that UNC game would be. That said, we'll certainly be pushing that back for a very special Thanksgiving edition of Tip Time if the chips fall where we're hoping they will. Going a little bit alternative with Thanksgiving menu this year. Really been going alternative the last couple of years, trying to just almost do like deconstructed Thanksgivings of different types, done chicken parm. I've done chicken cordon bleu. Tomorrow I'm doing a chicken franchise, and I'm doing a boursin-based pasta. Really excited about that. Hopefully maybe have some pictures on the program tomorrow. But that's going to do it for us here on Thanksgiving Eve. I hope you've got something fun lined up after watching basketball today. There's going to be plenty of it on TV. Hopefully some of you will make an appearance at your townie bars and have some fun times on this sort of classic night out. But all eyes on Nova right now, then on Purdue Marquette at 5 p.m. Eastern in the Maui final. But for now, grab your favorite beverage, get your TV switched over to ESPN2, hide from your boss if necessary. We'll see you tomorrow in what is hopefully a very happy Thanksgiving. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, it's tip time.